Protein. As an online personal trainer, one recurring theme that I often come across when I get new online clients is that most people, when starting out their fitness journey, struggle with getting their protein intake up. So this could potentially be you included as well, hence why you're watching this video. So in this video, I'm going to give you about 10 tips, in no particular order, from years of experience as to how you can increase your protein levels. Although before I get stuck in, I do want to say, if you're not subscribed to the channel already, then please do subscribe. Otherwise, let's get started into the main part of this video. Although before I share the 10 tips as to how you can effortlessly increase your protein intake, it could be good to first of all discuss what impacts your protein intake requirements, how much protein do you specifically need, as well as what happens if you don't consume enough protein. So when it comes to what impacts your protein requirements, this is going to depend on a variety of factors such as your age, your current body weight, as well as your activity levels and your goal. And then when it comes to how much protein you specifically need, and I'm going to speak from a fitness related perspective because that's why I'm making this video. And of course, if you don't move much throughout the day and you don't really exercise, then of course your protein requirements are going to be a lot lower. But if you're trying to gain muscle, facilitate fat loss goals, and even help with your recovery, then 0.7 grams to a gram per pound of body weight can be a great aim. That or a gram per centimeter of height. I would probably start off with whichever one feels less overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out with trying to make a conscious effort to increase your protein levels. It's also worth mentioning, if you have a lot of weight to lose, then of course it can be very tough to maybe aim for something like 250 grams or 275 grams of protein every single day. Then what I would say in that specific scenario is aim for about 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of your goal body weight. And then when it comes to what happens if you don't consume enough protein, of course, there's various ways I can take this down. If we're speaking specifically related to health and fitness, then if you don't consume enough protein, you're going to have a harder time with fat loss because protein is more filling. You're going to have a harder time recovering because protein helps with muscle recovery. You're going to have a harder time building muscle because protein helps with muscle building. And then maybe away from the fitness side of things, and this is still related to health, you're going to be more prone to injury, you're going to be more likely to fall sick, you're going to have more issues with your skin, hair, and nails, and you'll likely feel a lot more fatigued than usual. So otherwise, now I've got that out of the way, let's get stuck into 10 random tips in no particular order as to how you can effortlessly increase your protein intake. Now, tip number one is double your current portion sizes. And of course, this would be for your protein specifically. So if you're only consuming 100 grams of chicken breast at lunch, start having 200 grams. Because sometimes we can be so guilty of overcomplicating just so many things, especially when it comes to a fitness journey, especially when we're just starting out, whereas doing something as simple as doubling what we're already eating can just help tremendously. And now tip number two is ensure that you have a protein source with every single meal. And I would recommend at least 30 grams of protein. And now there's a few ways I could extend on this point. Number one, does it have to be every single meal for the rest of my life? Of course not, but at least have a protein source with the strong majority of your meals. Number two, and this could potentially be you included in this scenario, I've spoken to many people as an online coach who struggle with their protein intake. And when you gather more information about what this person is consuming day to day, you realize that about 50% of this person's meals don't even include a protein source. So if you're not even including a protein source with 50% of your meals, then of course you're going to have a really tough time getting your protein intake up, especially to meet the requirements that I mentioned around the start of this video. So again, ensure you're prioritizing your protein source with each meal and aim for at least 30 grams of protein. If you get more, then great. And now tip number three, and I think this is a really, really important tip, is front load your protein. And what I mean by this is get the bulk of your protein in at the start of the day. And why I like this is because it then makes hitting your protein goal feel a lot less overwhelming throughout the rest of the day. Because what often happens is, you might hear, okay, I should have a protein source with every single meal, but then you have like only 10 grams of protein at breakfast, then you have like 10 grams of protein at lunch, and then it's dinner time, and you're like feeling so overwhelmed because you've still got 120 grams of protein to hit, and it's already the evening, and then you realize that you're probably not going to hit it today, and and then it just ends up being a bit of a cycle. So don't fall into that. And make sure you front load most of your protein intake at the beginning of the day. If you can get like a solid 40 grams of protein at the start of your day, then again, it makes the rest of the day feel so much easier. Now, how are you going to specifically do that? We'll speak in more depth. And now this brings me nicely onto my next point, which is point number four. Have a list of 5 of your go-to protein sources. Now, number one, this isn't to say you can never have another protein source that's not on that list. Of course you can. But these 5 are going to be your 5 most convenient sources, and you should have at least half in the house at all times. And the reason why this can be such a game changer is because it's going to help with you planning in advance. And planning in advance is super important for something like increasing your protein intake, especially when you're in your earlier days. And a lot of these things aren't habit yet. So it's going to help with that decision fatigue. And for example, when you're getting up straight away, first thing in the morning, you're about to have breakfast, you know already what you're going to have there and then, which is going to, again, set you up nicely for the rest of the day. And you're not going to feel so overwhelmed, because sometimes with trying to increase your protein intake, it can feel so overwhelming. You don't know which protein sources to go for. You don't know where to start. It feels like there could be 100 things to choose from at times, and other times there feels like there's nothing. So again, just make a list of 5 of your go-to protein sources that you enjoy the taste of as well, and they're quite convenient. And now point number 5 is aim to have at least a protein snack every single day, because of course, when it comes to your meals, if you're aiming for about 30 grams of protein with each meal, then you would hit about 90 grams by the end of the day. But chances are, for the majority of people, especially if your goal is to gain muscle and recover, maybe lose weight, then 90 grams likely isn't going to be enough. So you could increase it still in the form of having at least one snack, and that's just going to make life more convenient too. And this could very well maybe be a part of that 5 protein list that I mentioned. So potential snacks that you could consider is like an egg, so maybe a boiled egg, maybe beef jerky, tuna, Greek yogurt, to name a few. I just quickly wanted to interrupt this video to give you a quick heads up about the free workout plan on my website. So if you want a free workout plan, then click the link that's going to be in the caption of this video. That link is going to take you to my website, and from my website you can grab your free workout plan. Now let's get back to the video. And now point number 6, and to be honest, this could have probably been part of point number 5, but I did feel like this could be its own point as well, is always aim to have protein powder and or protein bars at the ready in your house. And the reason why is because these can be such convenient sources of protein. And there's a few ways I can cover this. Number 1, some people very incorrectly say these are steroids. These are not steroids. And whoever is telling you that, I would never take fitness advice from that person, because even though that person probably means well, they have no idea what in the hell they're speaking about when it comes to that specific subject. Number 2, like I said, they are very convenient sources of protein. Put it like this. Let's say you've just gotten home from work, you're shattered, it's been a draining day, you're exhausted, and you're still maybe 25 grams away from your protein goal. The last thing you want to do is cook an entire chicken breast or an entire steak, because that's just long. So instead, you could just have a protein shake. In the total amount of time it both takes you to prepare and consume it, maybe less than 4 or 5 minutes, whereas obviously the steak and the chicken breast is going to take so much longer to both prepare, cook, and eat, all 3. So think of these as very convenient sources. And this isn't to say that they should be making up the majority of your protein intake, protein powders and bars. And on that note, I would aim to ensure that you're getting it from the majority of your protein intake from real foods. Again, it's just a convenient source of protein when and if you need it. And then point number 7 is consider omelets, stir fries, and smoothies. And the reason why I mentioned these 3 specifically is because, of course, this is a video about how to increase your protein intake, but they're great ways of both increasing protein intake and your fruit and or vegetable intake as well. So you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. For example, omelets, eggs, egg whites, and then you can put like ham and cheese in, nicely setting up for your protein goal. And then of course you can add vegetables to that as well, mushrooms, spinach, peppers. So that's a nice game changer there, especially because a lot of people struggle with their fruit and vegetable intake too. And then the same with stir fries. And of course they're going to have noodles in, but you can put a good amount of protein in stir fries too, staying with vegetables. And then you've got smoothies, grab frozen fruit from the supermarket and then put protein powder in there as well. And you're getting like a good chunk of fruit and protein in too. So those are 3 things to consider as well. And now points number 8, 9, and 10, they are going to be shorter points. So I'm going to go through them quite quickly. But point number 8 is prioritize leaner sources of protein. And this isn't to say you shouldn't have fattier sources ever again. Of course you can. But if you find that you're frequently maxing out your calorie goal before you've gotten anywhere close to your protein goal, of course there could be various reasons for that, which could be for another video, but you're probably just not consuming enough lean sources of protein, and that's something to think about. So again, prioritize maybe chicken breast, tuna, turkey, to name a few. And actually this brings me very nicely onto point number 9, and I do feel like this has been spoken about frequently enough throughout my life that it's worth being in the video, though I do feel like it can be quite random as well, is that nuts, peanuts, peanut butter, these are not good sources of protein. Now, oftentimes people will be like, oh, Leo, what are you talking about? Like, these are still healthy, they're a great source of fat. And to that, I agree. I'm not saying that they're not. Like, they are a good source of fat, but they are not a good source of protein. And the reason why I say this is, for example, in 50 grams of peanut butter, which is about 300 calories, you get only 11 grams of protein. Now, it's up to you to decide whether or not 11 grams of protein is worth 300 calories. Of course, it's going to, depend on day to day, but generally speaking, that's a very poor trade-off. Like, I would not consider that to be a protein source. Again, it's predominantly a fat source. So again, that could be why you're struggling, which takes me back to the previous point, because maybe you're using like sources such as maybe peanut butters, nuts, peanuts frequently to maybe try and hit your protein goals, whereas it's probably going to make it tougher. And now the final point, so point number 10, and again, this was in no particular order, so I'm not saying this is the most or the least important point, it's just the final point, is vary your sources so you don't get bored. And this is very important as well, because sometimes, I was going to say many people, not true, sometimes people do complain that they get bored of what they're consuming after a while, especially if they're consuming similar things every single day. So how about every once in a while, you just switch up your sources? For example, that list of your 5 go-to protein sources, maybe once a month, maybe you can just come up with a new list. Or if you really like that list, then of course you can keep it. But if you want some change, then yeah, come up with a new list. You don't always forever have to be going for the exact same protein sources. Every once in a while, if you feel the need, then feel free to switch it up. And that could be a great idea. Otherwise, that is it for the 10 points. Now, there are a couple of things I do want to mention before I finish this video. Tip number 1, I don't expect you to implement every single one of those 10 points on the back of this video, because that would be quite overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out. But what you would do very well to aim to do is aim to implement at least 3, 4, or 5 of these points, and that could help tremendously with increasing your protein intake. Now, point number 2, if you're just starting out and you're focusing on increasing your protein intake for the first time in your life, maybe you're getting it straight away, and that's amazing if you are. Or maybe you're finding it a little bit tough at first, and that's okay. That's what I want to emphasize as well. If you're having a tough time with increasing your protein intake at first, it's part of the journey. You're going to be fine. The most important thing is that you continue to apply a conscious effort, you're consistent, and you keep doing your best, because eventually you go through this enough times and you gain enough experience, you do eventually start to figure out things that work for you, convenient sources, maybe sources that you don't like as much, and what goes where in your routine and what you like the most. And eventually what I'm basically saying is it becomes tremendously easier, but the important thing is you keep going and you don't give up after week 1 just because it was a bit too hard. Again, some toughness, especially when you're starting something new, is entirely normal and you shouldn't let it scare you off. So as I said, with some conscious effort, consistency, and you doing your best, you are going to eventually get to a place where you start to effortlessly hit your protein goals. Otherwise, that is it for today's video. If you have any questions on the back of this video, of course, maybe send me an email or comment below. Do follow me on social media if you're not already. Remember, like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel. Take care, and I'll see you around.